It's a given. It's done. Matt Canada is staying the Steelers offensive coordinator. And you've heard enough people talk about that. So let's talk about the thing that's actually important here. What do the Steelers need to do to make sure Kenny Pickett has the right development here for the next season? We'll talk about that here on the North Shore Drive podcast, as well as some Pirates and Penguins talk going all around the world. We're leading off with Brian Batko. We got Matt Vensel and Jason Mackey talking Penguins and Pirates. It's going to be a fun North Shore Drive episode here on a Friday. Let's get into it.
You are now listening to the North Shore Drive podcast, a show on all things Pittsburgh sports from the writers of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, hosted by Christopher Carter.
Hello and welcome to the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here joined today by Brian Batko, our Steelers beat writer, one of our Steelers beat writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. As always, you can find the show on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and especially on YouTube. If you watch this video on YouTube, like the video, subscribe to this channel to get all of our daily content that comes out here from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, as well as the Monday, Wednesdays, and Friday episodes of the North Shore Drive podcast. Brian, you're on your front porch. You're chilling. You're not flying out to Kansas City or Buffalo. While it would be nice to cover some playoff action, I'm sure you're enjoying some time.
Yeah, it's actually my back porch, Chris. But look how sunny it still is in Pittsburgh, despite Matt Canada being retained for a third season and everything else that is wrong with the Steelers, right? You know, the sun still came up today. So, yeah, I mean, like you said, not a whole lot more to kick around on that topic, but I think it will be good for us to get into sort of what's the infrastructure now around Kenny Pickett to ensure that, you know, you can get the absolute most out of him, especially now while he's on a rookie contract. And that's kind of a time where teams with aging players and high-priced veterans can strike while the iron's hot.
I agree. And you have some aging players and some high-priced veterans on the Steelers roster. But let's talk about that offense. In the spirit of coaching hires and things that could happen, there has been the suggestion kicked around about the idea of what if the Steelers add a pass game coordinator, a la how Brian Flores was a senior defensive assistant, and how, you know, I think we've seen a lot of college programs do this too, especially across the country, where, you know, they'll have the same offensive coordinator, but this other person will be the pass game coordinator. And NFL teams have done it too. Is that something you see the Steelers doing, or do they keep to their old school method of don't have too many cooks in the kitchen?
I don't see what it would hurt, Chris. I mean, like you said, hey, you should call it a senior offensive assistant if you want. I mean, they basically made that title and position for Terrell Austin even before Brian Flores when they brought him on. Mm-hmm. Or I think they might have technically promoted him to that from secondary coach. But either way, it was a clear way to elevate somebody on the staff. Or, yeah, all these other titles that you have in the NFL, pass game coordinator. I think the Chargers have a pass game specialist. You know, doesn't really matter what you want to call that person, but I don't think it would be a huge hit to Matt Canada's ego. And if it is, who cares? Because let's think back to 2020 when he was brought on staff. I think everybody knew he was a little bit more than a quarterback's coach when Randy Fichtner was retained for his third season. So I think if you're the Steelers, you just quite simply say, hey, a few years ago, this was pretty much you, somebody we hired to get a fresh look at this, to help us put in some wrinkles and do some things differently and better with our offense. That to me is, you know, something that is not a bad idea now. Plenty of veteran coordinators, play callers out of work right now, looking for their next gig. And if you're the Steelers, I don't think it would hurt to have now a triumvirate, you like that word, of Matt Canada is the boss. Mike Sullivan is the quarterback's coach, who I think had a really big role and, maybe underlooked role in Kenny's development. I think those two have a pretty tight connection and bond, at least if you go by Kenny's interviews throughout the season. And then this third person who maybe it's somebody who's been around the block like Mike Sullivan. Maybe it's somebody who's more of an up-and-comer. It doesn't really matter. Somebody who can try to elevate this offense without necessarily replacing Matt Canada at this point, but it could also give you somebody on your staff who, if you feel like you need to make a change this time a year from now, you have a potential promotion candidate already there. And again, it gives Kenny Pickett another set of eyes to go through everything he's seeing, because, you know, he's going to put in the work himself. You know, he's going to do everything it takes for his own development this offseason. He's not a young raw quarterback that you have to worry about in that sense. He's going to study the playbook. We heard him on Cam Hayward's podcast saying he was basically home for a day or two before his fiance was basically like, all right, you're not the same. You need to get out there and start training or do something. So, he's going to be sinking his teeth into it maniacally. And I don't think it would be, I just don't see how it would hurt to get somebody else in there next year who can maybe help take him to another level.
I agree with that sentiment. I do think the Steelers could benefit from having someone helping with his development. That being said, what is the next step of his development? What is the thing the biggest thing that you think that the Steelers should be focusing on to help him? Because one thing that I look at is the fact that the Steelers were one of the best teams on third downs this season. They had the seventh best conversion rate at 44.9%, and that's right up there with teams. That's ahead of that's right. It's right around the, teams like the Eagles, like the Bengals, like the Niners, teams that that are playing right now with offenses that are carrying them in a lot of games. But they also converted the second most third downs because they had to win on third downs because they weren't winning enough on first and second downs to set up the better situations. Is that something that you focus on? Kenny Pickett averaged around 8 yards in his average depth of target, which was kind of like right in the middle part of the league. But if you have a young quarterback, you see what Brock Purdy's doing with some of the deeper throws that he's made in the playoffs. Is part of that helping Kenny Pickett be confident to take more strikes down the field that do spread the offense out a little more, or is there something else that the Steelers need to be focusing on with Pickett?
I think that's part of it is certainly backing up defenses. I mean, every NFL analyst I feel like that I've talked to over the last couple seasons, when discussing Matt Canada's scheme, whether it was Ben Roethlisberger's offense or Mitch Trubisky or now Kenny Pickett's offense, they always felt like they weren't keeping defenses honest. Defenses were playing so forward against the Steelers. That was bogging down the run game. There was no threat really of going over the top. Now I think you can have that with George Pickens, if Calvin Austin gets healthy and can be a burner and, kind of run down the field really fast and catch a ball in stride. Now that the Chase Claypool element is gone from that offense, I think Kenny Pickett proved toward the end of the season that he can make those throws. He can do that. So it's always easier said than done to open things up. The Chiefs, when they play, sometimes the safeties aren't even in the screen because they're so worried about what Patrick Mahomes can do. You take risks doing that as well. Look at the Bills with Josh Allen in that game against the Dolphins. It almost seemed like they were running plays from NFL blitz. It was either the bomb or it was or checking down or getting picked off, right? So you need to be aggressive but not reckless, and that's the balance every NFL offense and every NFL quarterback is striving to find. But the other piece of it that I'll say with Pickett that I think the Steelers need to do more of, can do more of with his skill set, is simply play action. Maybe it's something where you didn't feel like you had the running game necessarily to do more of it early in the season. But if teams are going to respect what you did at the end of this year with Najee Harris and that offensive line that came together, get Kenny comfortable, turning his back to the defense with the play fake, and then whipping his head around and finding his open man. And, having that in your toolbox as well, because the Steelers were near the bottom of the league in play action pass attempts. So increase that usage, I think, is good for any young quarterback, but especially somebody like Kenny, who's pretty mobile. If the play breaks down, we saw how he could extend plays, shake off pass rushers. I think that is something that could bring this offense, into another tier, essentially, because where you are in 2022 isn't cutting it.
No, it's not, and I think that's again what we're talking about as a specialist here. Let's wrap this up in a minute here. What's your confidence level that Kenny Pickett is there for that turnaround next year, so that we're not talking about this again this time next season? You wrote a piece about how he had a nook in the locker room where his locker was kind of like his film study temple, that's just what he did. What is your confidence that all of the work that he's putting in is going to lead to the second year jump for him?
I mean, I think he's going to make that jump, but it's all relative, right? It's difficult in the AFC. I mean, I've had people ask me, do you think the Steelers make the playoffs next year? It's hard to forecast. I mean, you certainly feel like the Chiefs and Bills are in there for sure. Bengals would be stunning to not see them get back there. I mean, they're just hitting on all cylinders right now. So that's essentially three spots that, unless things really go awry, are spoken for. And then you've got a lot of up-and-coming teams that I think are probably better positioned right now than the Steelers, at least on paper. When you look at the Chargers, the Dolphins with a healthy Tua, the Ravens with a healthy Lamar Jackson if he's back in Baltimore. So now you're down to essentially one spot for the Steelers or all the other contenders around the AFC. So I think Kenny will play better, and that's the big question, the big reason why everybody was, paying so close attention to the Matt Canada thing is you have time. It's okay to be patient to some extent with a second-year quarterback, but Cam Hayward's not getting any younger. Minkah Fitzpatrick and TJ Watt are in the prime, the absolute prime of their careers right now. You've got this young offense right now that's still pretty affordable. Only Deontay Johnson has gotten the big second contract. So it's never a situation where you feel like time is not of the essence in the NFL. Last year was kind of the reset year for them. Canada, maybe he got a free pass for the first season that he had a aging Ben Roethlisberger, but now you need to start putting the pieces together. I do have some confidence that Kenny will do his part, but he can't do it alone, and he's still going to need probably a bit more of a supporting cast than some of these other more purely gifted passers in his conference.
I think it's going to take a lot of contributions, but I do agree. I think that Kenny Pickett, he's going to put in the work this offseason, and we'll see improvement. The question will be what else comes along with him, be it the offensive line, the run game, the receivers, as well as the coaching. We'll talk more about that as the offseason rolls along, but we got to switch topics here. We got to talk some Pirates, and we're going to bring Jason Mackey on the show because I want to ask him about Andrew McCutchen being on the team. He broke the story of him joining the team, but now that we've had some time to let this sink in, where does that have the Pirates right now in them trying to build the next generation of a team that can make a run and have some good years for that organization? We'll talk about that in just a minute here on the North Shore Drive podcast. But first, we got to talk to you guys about Valley Pool & Spa. Valley Pool & Spa is the number one place that you need to go to find an in-house hot tub, swim spa, or sauna from Valley Pool & Spa right now. Especially, as Brian said, the sun's up now, but that harsh winter is coming back. That you best believe, Pittsburgh. So if you want to be nice and cozy inside, chilling with a hot tub, a swim spa, or a sauna, Valley Pool & Spa is the place to go. And you can get a Finlay sauna that's going to help melt your stress away so nicely in your home and feel rejuvenated without having to go outside. Save big now on all in-stock hot tubs, swim spas, and saunas by visiting valleypoolspa.com. That's valleypoolspa.com. We're back here on the North Shore Drive podcast. I'm Chris Carter, host of the show, but we're joined now by Jason Mackey, our Pirates beat writer and just Pittsburgh sports extraordinaire. He's always knowing all the things. But Jason, you broke the story across the country that Andrew McCutchen was making his return to the ball club where he won league MVP, led the Pirates to the only time that I've seen in my sports watching life where they were a playoff team and consistently competitive. Now he's brought back to a team that's trying to get back there. And yes, we've talked about this before on this very show just a couple months ago. The last few seasons have been abysmal, 100-loss seasons, a bad pace even in the COVID-stricken year. But the 2010 year, before that rise that led to the mid 2010s when they were competitive with Kutch, that was also one of the worst years statistically speaking in their win-loss record in this program, in this ball club's history. And it took guys to kind of lift that culture up and get the team to being that competitive squad. Is McCutchen the kind of leader, and can he be the guy that's helping kind of lead the charge forward to get back to being consistently competitive?
I do, Chris. I think so. But it's not just McCutchen. I mean, there are other guys and other needs they addressed this offseason, and they've done that. Carlos Santana is an example of that. I would even say Austin Hedges could be an example of that behind the plate. Rich Hill. This has struck me for a number of years, certainly months, to look a lot like their last sort of run up to winning. You worry about the farm system. You worry about development. You draft better. You get a group of prospects and you grow them up into good major leaguers. They did that 13, 14, 15. They stopped doing that. But in order to get there, it takes stuff like this. And I equate what we're going to see from the Pirates this season a lot to 2012, where they show flashes. You begin to see the progress. I don't think they ultimately have enough to compete, but you'll start to see seeds of that. And you need people like McCutchen to help grow, mold, and whatever, younger players.
I remember that 2012 season. I think that was the year when it was like the super extra innings, I want to say, against Colorado, and then it came where they were going back and forth with them, and you could see it. McCutchen was there, Marte was growing, Alvarez was making plays, and they were an exciting team, but they needed that extra push. And then it was 2013 when they got over that hump. What do you think is the next big thing that you need to see from other guys? Because it's good to have veterans like Santana, like McCutchen lead the way. But what do you need to start seeing from some of these younger guys that are the developing pieces who need to become the leaders in the future?
Yeah, Chris, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's what I need to see from the Pirates. And I think that's the next step. Like, I like what the Pirates did this offseason. Maybe I'm one of the few, I don't know. Seems like there was a lot of negativity pre-Kutch, and then once they signed Kutch, people kind of chilled out a little bit. But like, what I need to see is Henry Davis grow up into a legitimate major league player. I need to see Andy Rodriguez grow up into a legitimate major league player. Mike Burrows, Quinn Priester, Malcolm Nunez. Like, those are guys that are going to start at AAA, and the one-year deals are great. But the first group, those minor league guys, when they mature and grow into regulars, that's when you're really going to see change affected. Even Liover Peguero, Nick Gonzalez, Jared Triolo, they've got some legitimate talent in the minor leagues right now. It's just when those guys grow up. And, I could keep going. Rodolfo Castro, G1 Bay. Like, I feel bad I'm ignoring good players. But when these younger guys grow into the Pedros, the Neil Walkers, the Kutch was already there and established a little bit. But, when you get those regular pieces and they're contributing, that's when this thing's really going to get fun.
I agree. Like, you want to see those young guys stepped up, because when they do, I think that's what brings the energy. How close are we seeing guys like Henry Davis and Termarr Johnson and other guys? How close are we seeing that generation start to peak into the majors and getting more consistent time?
Termarr is not as close as Davis. Termarr finished after the draft. He was down in Bradenton, and he's a high school guy. I mean, I love Termarr Johnson. I think he's going to be a lot of fun. He's got an awesome personality. For his sort of body build, man, does he have some sweet power. But he's still a couple years away. I think he's still only 19. Anyway, like Henry, we're going to see this season. Endy, we're going to see this season. Malcolm Nunez, we're going to see. I mean, all the guys I mentioned, honestly, we'll see them at some point. Are we going to see them at the beginning? Probably not, especially not the catching guys. I think that's a tall ask to tell a, 20, 21, 22-year-old catcher, like, hey, you're going to come in here and then you're going to catch this, Rich Hill or Rowe or Ortiz or Keller or whatever. Like, that's why they got Austin Hedges. So I think the first maybe 2 months, you're going to see guys working, month and a half, 2 months, something like that. See guys working in Indy. But this season, once again, much like last season, it's going to be a nice little trickle of guys coming up here.
I think that's what every Pirates fan wants to see. Is I think Pirates fans, even the ones who can be very negative on social media and things at times, you want to see progress. And I think if these guys got in the conversation for a 70-win season, like getting up there to the point where, like, hey, like, there were some good runs that you had in different parts of the different months of the season, I do think that would be enough to signal to people, hey, like, the dark days are over. This is on the upswing again. I guess. How realistic is it, or what is the ceiling you feel like for the ball club that they have assembled right now? Because as we know, things can change a lot going into a season.
Yeah, no doubt. And I mean, I look at like an honest projection model right now. I would have a tough time seeing them put higher than 75 wins. I mean, I don't know, maybe the craziest thing in the world happens and they break through and flirt with 500. I don't know. But I mean, I would put a realistic label on this team as like, 70 would be bad. 76 would be really great. Probably in the 74 range, something like that. I think they probably start out pretty hot. And then they fade as the season goes along. I think, either guys because of age, trades, just players being up here that are not used to 162 games and competing through all of that, it might trail off a little bit, but that's what I look at. I mean, this could be a 73, 74 win team that does it in an interesting way. And I think it's an important step going from 100 back-to-back 100-loss seasons, get 75 wins, let's just say, earmark that. And then the following season, you should spend more money. Your prospects should be better developed. You have an even more clear idea of the holes you need to fill. And then in 2024, 500 should be assumed. It's like, how far above 500 can we go?
I agree with that approach there. let's say you're some of the older vets that they've signed to kind of help guide them to that point, like McCutchen, Santana, those guys. Let's say, like, because McCutchen, I understand he's on a 1-year deal, correct?
Yep.
So, like,
Yep.
let's say this year those things happen, right?
Yep.
And then next year you're looking at a ball club that could make those moves there, and you could go be aggressive. But do you keep those guys around who helped set that up? And I know it's asking way far in advance, but it just seems to me like, part of what I thought was really special about that group were guys like AJ Burnett, Russell Martin, guys who were able to come in and say, "Hey guys, this is what winning is like. This is what we got to do." I know that these are short-term deals, but I get a feeling that if they're able to get these guys to commit, maybe keep them around, even if they're not your best players, just keep them in the organization so that they can be the ones that are promoting some of these guys like Davis and Cruz, guys that carry them forward.
No doubt. And I would say they would be open to that. This actually dovetailed. I talked to Ben Sherrington the other day. Was it yesterday? Yesterday, or the day before? I can't remember. It's baseball. I can't remember days. But I talked to him for a while.
You got time.
Yeah, for a piece that it's online right now. One of the things we talked about was allowing, like, you want to get guys, right? Like, it was they wanted to go out in free agency and plug a bunch of holes, but you don't want to do it in a way that blocks young kids. So knowing that, sort of prefacing it with that, if Santana is blocking somebody, then that might be tougher. If Kutch is blocking somebody, it might be tougher. At the same time, like, if those guys produce the way they can and become the, like, clubhouse leader, veteran voice, beloved older guy, like, you mentioned AJ Burnett, you're going to find a place for that guy, right? Like, you need to have that guy on your team. You probably need to have multiple guys. So I would say they're open to it. They just need to make sure it's not blocking prospects and that the performance checks out as well.
Absolutely. He's Jason Mackey. Check out his latest analysis. What have the Pirates accomplished during a surprisingly busy offseason? Available at post-gazette.com under the Pirates tab. Jason, thanks so much for joining us. We'll have you back very soon talking more things Pirates and Pittsburgh sports. We're switching to Penguins because we got to talk about them in their push to try to make the playoffs. We'll do that in just a minute here. But first, on the North Shore Drive podcast, I'm going to remind you about Yinzers in the Berg. So Yinzers, listen up. The Steelers campaign may be over and done with, but if you want to support them, the Pirates, Penguins, who are in the middle of trying to make that playoff push, you can get all your Pittsburgh sports gear at Yinzers in the Berg. And they have 2 stores in the Strip District that you can visit at any point in time. But if you can't get to the Strip District, best way to get the merch is yinzerspgh.com. Yinzerspgh.com, updating every week with new apparel, new accessories, all new gear, all Pittsburgh sports, ready and available for you online. Again, at yinzerspgh.com, where you can find all the best gear from Yinzers in the Berg. We're back here on the North Shore Drive podcast. I'm Chris Carter, your host here, joined now by our Penguins beat writer at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Matt Vensel. Matt's joining the show. He's just getting back from Ottawa. The Penguins suffered a tough loss in overtime. Matt, we wanted to talk to you because you did your post-game report and your gamer, and you've done your analysis, but wanted to get a sense from what are the things from that loss that are kind of seeping out that you continue to see as themes that are being problematic for this Penguins team right now?
Sure. It was a weird game in the sense that the Penguins took 9 penalties. Mike Sullivan wasn't thrilled about that. I think he was looking for more consistency, maybe on more calls on Ottawa. But there's a game or two like that every year where, the penalties don't go their way and the players and coaches are ticked. I think when you zoom out and kind of look at their play, the little bit of 5-on-5 that there was, the Senators took it to them. I mean, they're a team that's outside of playoff position. They're young. They're skilled, they're playing run and gun, and the Penguins try to play along with them, and it didn't go well. So that led to some of the penalties. So again, it's the Penguins struggling against a team that is probably inferior in terms of talent. And then, another big trend is the PK. I mean, they had to kill 9 penalties. That's a lot. Guys get tired out. It just takes a toll mentally and physically, but the PK has been slipping. It's back-to-back games where they've allowed multiple power play goals. They were really good through November and December in that phase, but after the Christmas break, they've shown signs of slippage. Part of it's due to some guys being out of the lineup, but that's another thing you can take away from this game and say it was more than just an anomaly, a one-time thing.
No, I agree in that point there, but I think you get the benefit of a 2-day turnaround to kind of get another crack at those guys and in your own arena. What are the things that they need to kind of clamp down on, one, to avoid the penalty situation that they're in and kind of put things in a, frame the game in a way that they're going to be able to control the pace?
Sure. I mean, with a team like Ottawa, Mike Sullivan likes to say teams like this play with a free spirit. That's his way of saying they've got nothing to play for, and they're going to take a lot of chances chasing goals. I think these are the games where the Penguins, at this point in their life cycle with some older players, is they're going to be more disciplined, let the game come to them, defend first, and then take the opportunities that are there. I mean, if they get into another game where they're trying to trade chances, or it becomes best, makes it more of a level playing field, so to speak, for the Senators. So it's just getting back to the team game, and that's just been the problem with them for the last 3 weeks, period. They were so good for about 6 weeks, and then they had 4 days off over Christmas, and it's like they completely forgot what gave them success. And that's just a big problem, is their inability to just like bear down and play 60 minutes. I mean, that's something they keep talking about, and it just continues to be a problem. They just can't put forth complete efforts. And even more maddening is just how they play in the third period with leads and overtime. The fact that this is we said it a million times, this is the league's oldest team, tons of experience, and yet they don't know how to close out hockey games. So it's more so just like the team game. But yeah, I mean, this is a great example of maybe a building block for them, where if they can just play a good, sound game, win 3-2, and maybe they can start to build some traction from there.
I agree. You do got to build traction. You got to kind of stop the bleeding, get back in the win column. I know they beat the Ducks, but you look at their situation right now. They have 51 points, ranked eighth in their conference. Barely scraping in. The Islanders are right behind them at 50 points. And I know it's mid-January when there's a lot of time to make it, and we've seen plenty of Penguins teams with this core make late pushes to solidify their playoff spot. But is this team built to do that in your eyes right now? Are they a team that you see, corrects a lot of their mistakes, plays better hockey, and makes that push? Or is this who they are? Or are we about to see a drop off and the Penguins miss the playoffs for the first time since I don't even know when? Was it 2003?
It would have been Crosby's rookie year in 2005, 2006. So yeah, I believe it's the longest run in pro sports. Definitely the longest run in the NHL currently. But yeah, I mean, this is my 5th year covering the team. I can't remember a time where it seemed this kind of iffy that they would make the playoffs. I mean, I still think they're going to get there. You look at the teams they're going up against. They've got more talent. They've got more experience. They've been there before. There's the old cliche about flipping a switch and whether that's possible. But I think we saw in last year's playoffs, at least for the first few games against the Rangers, that this team with all these older players, experienced players, could turn it on when they needed to. So, you want to think that the Penguins are going to do that at some point, but it's really important for them to start taking care of business. I mean, they're playing some lesser opponents. I don't want to say some of these teams are bad teams, but they're going to be playing a lot of tough division games coming up here. So this is a slightly softer part of their schedule. I know it's tougher. It's 9 games in 16 days, but they got to get in gear now, because they don't want to put themselves in a hole where they're playing a bunch of really good opponents and they have to power through. So yeah, I'm going to be fascinated to see what happens here. I mean, my stance has always kind of been, as long as Sidney Crosby is there, they're going to find a way. And until that's proven to be false, I'm going to stick to that. But certainly with the way the team is playing, with some of the injuries, big questions like the bottom 6 and goaltending, it does feel a lot more questionable, their place in the playoffs right now, with what do we have, like 38 games left or somewhere around there. So still some time, but I think the urgency is there now, and I think they're feeling it internally.
No, I agree with you though about the point, especially how many times you've seen them kind of knuckle up and figure, hey guys, let's get it done right here and now. And I've always believed in guys who have been champions, and guys like Crosby, Malkin, Gensel, let's take like this crew. They know what it's like to be in these tough moments. I think across all sports, you see that, and I think Mike Sullivan as a coach knows what it's like to be in these tough moments. The question will be, can they look at their own game, their own tape, and say like, hey, can we find these answers? Because like you said, you got to beat the beatable teams. In Ottawa, dropping a game to Ottawa, they're bottom 3 in the conference right now. And those are the games, like you said, you need to win those, so that when you're going up against the better teams, like when they start playing the Bruins or, the Canes or someone like that, you're not needing to play perfect hockey just to survive to get into the playoffs. You want those games to maybe be the ones that propel you to get a better seeding in the playoffs if that's going to be possible down the stretch. But like you've also said, there's a lot of time for them to figure this out. Granted, you're running out of a lot of time, but because March is getting closer. But I do feel like there's time to do it. But I do think it's going to be a big thing to get it done, especially Friday night at home against Ottawa.
Yeah, and it's a big burden on the core guys. I mean, it's easy for us to say these guys are going to get it done, but the supporting cast have to step up too. I mean, bottom six, they're getting next to nothing. Goaltending has been a problem. I mean, there's just a tremendous burden on their star players who've been there before to carry the team in the playoffs. And I think we're already starting to see some of that burden on their older players. I mean, some guys have gotten injured. Crosby and Jake Gensel have kind of been a little bit of a lull lately. I mean, the top six in particular has had to carry so much of the burden. So you do wonder if just physically they're going to be able to do it. So they need some other guys to step up. But yeah, there's no doubt, at least when you look at their core guys, like they're holding up their end of the bargain, and we'll see if they can lug this team over the finish line into the playoffs.
We will see how that happens moving forward. Our man Matt, he's going to be on site Friday night, ready to go, giving you all the great coverage of that. If the Penguins do make a push, it's going to be exciting, and I think all of Pittsburgh does rally around this team when they're finding ways to win. I was there for one of the playoff games of the Rangers when they were able to pull off a win, and they still capture an energy in this city. It'll be exciting to see that happen. Matt, we'll be following your work the entire way. Follow his work at post-gazette.com, and of course, post-game work that Matt will have there. I'm Chris Carter of the North Shore Drive podcast. Thanks so much for joining us. Thank you, Matt, for joining us. Thanks also to Jason and Brian for their contributions. We'll be back Monday with our Monday episode of the North Shore Drive podcast here in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette's podcast platforms. But remember, we always bring out daily content, so check out for all the things we do right here from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. We'll see you on Monday.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you're watching this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. For 6 months of digital access to post-gazette.com for just $6, click the link down below in the description.